Brian Barnett is just a regular guy. He's not a doctor. He has no legal license in any field of mental or emotional health. Brian Barnett merely shares the insights he's gained from his personal experiences for anybody who may choose to use such information as he or she personally chooses, while accepting full responsibility for his or her own individual thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and actions. Brian Barnett assumes no responsibility whatsoever for anybody's individual choice to expose himself or herself to any information that Brian Barnett shares, and by listening to this program, you're acknowledging that you, and only you, are responsible for your own thoughts, feelings, and actions.
Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome back to the Last Symptom Podcast. I'm Brian Barnett, the creator and host of the show. The theme of this show and the Last Symptom body of work as a whole is accurate insights about emotional health and emotional unhealth, as well as authentic recovery from emotional disorders such as borderline personality disorder. I had it, for the first 35 years of my life, completely oblivious to the fact that I was living with a disorder. And now I really don't have it. And so I share the experience of how I got from there to here with others nowadays to help them do the same. Today's primary topic will be about what a healthy and appropriate apology process looks like and exactly why it looks that way. I originally intended to discuss this topic last week because it's meant as a compliment to episode 5 of this season, which dealt with my dad and his consistent disregard for boundaries and his obliviousness to these sorts of things. I also want to talk a little bit about Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie, who have been an intense focus in the news here in the U.S. lately. I try to keep on top of the news. It's not easy these days because I don't have a lot of respect for journalists and I don't have a lot of respect for news organizations. So I'm very discerning. I'm very discerning about who I get my news from. But when a big story hits and everybody's talking about the same thing, one thing I like to do is I like to go through all the different reputable news sources, and I say reputable with a tremendous sense of irony, because I don't think any of them are. I shouldn't say that. There are a couple who I think really place value on traditional journalistic principles, but they are so in the minority that it's not even funny. But so I do have a couple that I daily get my news from, but when a big story is happening, what I'll do is I'll go and I'll see what everybody else is saying about it, because I want to see if any more details come out, things like that. So anyway, this Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie story is one of those stories, and the reason why it was interesting to me is because of my work here with the Last Symptom. But also, it was kind of attractive to me, the fact that they seem to enjoy the natural world and getting out and doing some adventurous things like that. We'll talk about them enough here in just a little bit. I have a campfire story at the end of the show that I want to share with you. And I don't want to give too much away right now, but it was a story. The story is about a young kid named José. And when I told him that Batman's sister lived next door to me. So I'll tell you all about that towards the end of the show. Before we get into all the fun stuff, I have to make some announcements, so please bear with me. These things are important. They help people find the resources I offer, And they also help people support my work if they're so inclined to do so. So it's something I need to talk about. But don't you go fast forwarding through it, because right in the middle of it might be when I decide to tell that José Batman story. TheLastSymptom.com is my website full of free resources for you to take advantage of. There are also a few modest paid services available at TheLastSymptom.com. Those help support my overall body of work. And those paid services are one-on-one phone and Zoom conversations with me, and most importantly, the Last Symptom Fundamentals course, which is a pre-recorded intensive video course for those interested in authentic and permanent recovery from emotional disorder such as borderline personality disorder. To access these things at TheLastSymptom.com, you just go to the paid services tab. If you're curious about what it's like taking the Last Symptom Fundamentals course, just imagine a pre-recorded online college course. It's just like that. If you'd like to experience a chapter of this course at no cost to you, visit the Last Symptom YouTube channel and search for the video titled Sneak Peek, The Last Symptom Fundamentals Pre-Recorded Course, Day 3, Chapter 9. How long did that take me? It took me like 30 seconds. And yet I got people out there saying that I dedicate the majority of this show to talking about that thing. But I talked about that enough in last week's episode, so we won't go into it here. I will tell you that I got a very respectful email asking me to delete that episode of the Last Symptom podcast. My answer to that very respectful email, which I did appreciate, is no. I'm not going to delete it, because the person, I'm sure, is not going to delete their negative review that prompted that episode. And there are consequences. You know, the idea that this person wrote that in a fit of borderline personality disorder splitting or something like that is reason enough for her not to have to face the consequence of me then doing a show about that review and breaking down why it wasn't a reasonable review or a fair review and why it expressed a lot of falsehoods. The idea that just because she has an emotional disorder that she shouldn't be held to consequences is not a healthy line of reasoning. So she made the review. She posted it publicly. I responded with a public episode of this show breaking down all the reasons why it wasn't fair and why it expressed a lot of falsehoods. And I'm pretty sure that she's not out there deleting her review, and so I'm not deleting my episode. And even if she were to delete her review, there are consequences. I live with consequences, don't you? If you don't, you're not healthy. There's something wrong in your life. We all have to deal with the consequences of our decisions, and so that's why I'm not going to delete that episode. And hopefully people can see the healthy reasoning for that. The Last Symptom online community is no longer on Facebook. Now, there is a group on Facebook. It's the original group on Facebook, but it's not active. Nothing's happening there. So the online community, the active and happening online community for The Last Symptom is no longer on Facebook. It's now on a platform called Locals, Locals. You can join us there by visiting thelastsymptom.locals, LOCALS.com. And the last announcement I'll make here today is that donations continue to be an important and valued support for my work. So if you got the itch to make a donation, you can do so at thelastsymptom.com in the donate/sponsor tab. Now let me tell you the story of Gabby Petito, age 22, and Brian Laundrie, I think it's Laundrie, 23. And we'll take a nice long hard look here at what fake horseshit love looks like. It's not even love, but that's what people call it. I'm sure many of you listening believe that your notions of love really represent love, and we'll talk about it today to see if that's true, if they really do. These two spent their summer traveling in a white van through the American West, while Gabby posted about their adventures across social media. How you reckon she presented their relationship on social media and their experience of traveling across the country? Well, of course, these were pictures of them smiling and kissing and hugging and hanging all over each other like possums, putting forth this image of perfect bliss and happiness. What a ridiculous thing. The irrational compulsion of unhealthy people to be brainlessly driven to putting in all of this effort, going to great lengths to present an illusion of contentment. Now, I should say that I ain't just picking on Gabby and Brian. And I'm not just picking on just any old people who do this sort of thing. This is a phenomenon that is inseparable from emotional unhealth. And I did it too. My family did it. Other people in my extended family, they do it. So when I'm talking about these things and being critical, I'm not being critical of the individuals themselves per se, right? I'm not just picking on somebody. But I do need to highlight the phenomenon of this feature of emotional unhealth, because everybody who is emotionally damaged and unhealthy, they do this, and we're going to talk about why here. This is not just an excuse to pick on people unfairly. The reason we're talking about it at all is to analyze it, understand it, escape it. Also, it's going to be important for you, if you're somebody who is escaping this, to be able to go on in your life looking out at the world, not in a judgmental way, but to look out at the world, recognize these things from a mile off, and avoid them in your own lives. I have this thing set up on my phone. My daughter has Apple Arcade, but before she can download a game, she has to send me she sends a request, or she tries to download the game. That sends a request to my phone, and then I approve it or I disapprove it, depending on what the game is, and that allows me to keep in touch with the things she's being exposed to. And so I just had a couple of those come through here. You might have heard them on the recording. So I'm just going to approve those real quick. All right, we can get back to our topic of discussion here. So yeah, when I go about my life nowadays, having recovered from these things and knowing now what they are and how to identify them, and I'm looking out at the world and seeing these things in other people, this is not a judgmental thing. I'm not looking at them critically, them as people. It would be my hope that everybody would escape these things. I certainly once existed in a state of ignorance and didn't know these things. I don't want people to hold me, their evaluations of me, to that time in my life, So I recognize that even people now who are living in these ways and are ignorant in these sorts of ways, that this is not a reflection on them as people. It's a reflection on their ignorance for sure. But a person doesn't have to remain ignorant. Many of you listening today might identify with a lot of the things that we talk about today. I'm not judgmental about you as a person. not being critical about you as a person. I'm critical about these approaches to life, the ignorance, and the sometimes purposeful ignorance. But I recognize that people and the things they do are not one and the same, and that people can change. So I'd just like you to keep that in mind, por favor. So, ridiculous thing, this obsession or this compulsion to put all of this energy and time, and it does require a lot of energy and time to create an image of bliss and happiness when you're not blissful or happy. Have you ever thought about that? I mean, some of you might know it from personal experience. Like I said, did this myself. I always wanted to present my family, when I'd talk to my friends or whatever at school. My family is just the ideal family. It takes a lot of energy to create a narrative and to cover up ugly truths, and that energy could be used for other things. So chew on that for a little bit. People being more concerned about selling an image of contentment rather than using that same energy and effort to just do what's necessary to actually be content genuinely. Well, as you've been following along with the last symptom, hopefully you've begun to understand why unhealthy people do this at all. It's fascinating. They're like programmed, predictable, unthinking creatures. And in fact, early on in the last symptom world, I often talked about emotional disorders as being, the cause of them as being like a computer algorithm. The algorithm, once you put that algorithm into place, what the program will do. Because the algorithm tells the program what to do. It tells it how to behave. And emotional disorders are like that. You look out at the world of people, you see how they're behaving and acting, their compulsions, and that they don't even give any thought to whatsoever. They just act. They just follow the command of the algorithm. And you can trace that back and determine almost exactly what type of belief system they live with. Remember, for unhealthy people, their whole value system, what is their whole value system built on? Is it built on the idea of inherent value? In other words, is it built on an inner value system? Does a thing just have value just because of what it is? Nope, not for unhealthy people. Their whole value system is built on external things, only the external. So the only value they perceive in things is based on what they imagine the world of people give it. What am I saying? What I'm saying is that a thing only has value dependent on how many people value that thing. If they don't imagine that the majority of people value that thing, then it doesn't have value, you see. So that whole value system is based on people looking at a thing and liking it or not liking it, valuing it or not valuing it. So the idea that a thing can just have value, whether people value it or not, totally foreign to these sorts of people. So, for example, if they imagine that most people have a negative view of bananas, then bananas are negative, right? The conclusion they reach is that bananas are negative because what determines if it's positive or if it has value or not? What determines this is what they imagine most people think about bananas. So if most people have a negative view of bananas, then what is the only value a banana can have to a person like that? A negative, low value. Do you see that from where they stand, bananas can't have value just on the merit of being a banana. It's totally contrary to the way they understand value works. Now, that example might seem too far-fetched, but I assure you it is not far-fetched. I'm telling you right now, it don't matter how tasty bananas are. Unhealthy people would completely reject bananas as being something of no value if they suspected that the majority of people viewed them as not having value. And that's for real. They really would turn on bananas and begin perceiving them as absolutely valueless on their own, if they imagined that most other people did not view them with value. Do you see any other natural consequences that come from believing that the value of things is dependent upon what other people think? Well, first of all, where does this attitude come from at all? It comes from the way parents convince children. So at home, growing up, children are observing their parents' attitudes, the real attitudes that the parents live with. So these children, observing parents who live with the real attitudes, that value, the nature of value and where value comes from, works like this. This is the conclusion that they themselves reach also. So children in these sorts of families, they grow up, and their understanding of their own value as human beings is not based on what and who they are. In other words, the value is not based on the fact that they're a human being. Remember, that sort of value system doesn't exist in this type of worldview. A thing can't have value just based on what it is. Value only comes from people looking at it and saying to themselves, that has value. And the more people you get who look at a thing like that, feeling like, okay, that thing has value, that's where the value comes from. Not that it just is what it is and that it has value because of what it is, but only if lots of people view it as having value. That's where the value has to come from. So these children growing up in families who view the world this way look at themselves and they realize, well, shoot, if that applies to a banana, that applies to me too. I can't just have value because I'm a person. My value is dependent on other people's opinions of me. Right? So it's value that has to be earned. And it's really sad because inherent value, which all people possess because they're people, doesn't have to be earned at all. You don't have to earn inherent value. You can't earn inherent value. And what's more, inherent value can't be diminished or taken away. But do you understand that the perspective here that we're talking about from these unhealthy people, from their perspectives, a person's value cannot be based on the simple fact that a person is a person. That doesn't in any way fit their understanding of how value works and where it comes from. Same thing with their feelings, right? I've told you that your feelings always matter. Your feelings always have value. An unhealthy person, that doesn't fit their understanding of how value works at all, right? In order for their feelings to matter, somebody has to first think, all right, what you're feeling right now matters. Then it matters. But that's not the way the real world works. That's not the way your feelings really get their value. The way your feelings really get the value is the fact that they're your feelings. So it doesn't matter If anybody agrees with what your feelings still have value. Doesn't matter if anybody values you as a person, you still have value. Because why? Because you're still a person. The value is an inherent aspect of what you are. So, as people, they don't perceive their individual value as people as being a natural part of just being a person. See, because that's perceiving human value as inherent to being human. And that's the healthy truth. That's the reality. But they instead view their individual value as being entirely dependent on other people valuing them first. I hope that's making sense. The whole value system they live with depends on what other people think. So once you begin seeing the real underlying issues at play here, the unhealthy perceptions of the nature of these sorts of things, you also then begin understanding the true extent of the effects that these sorts of totally unhealthy attitudes have on people. And then once you do that, it's not surprising whatsoever to see people putting in mountains, and I mean mountains of effort, to create illusions of things and putting more value on the illusion of it rather than simply putting in that same amount of time and effort into achieving the real deal, putting in that same time and effort to actually enjoy that real reality. What matters most to unhealthy people? What they imagine others think. Why? Because the value of everything in their lives is based on what they imagine others think. So they take their white van, this couple we're talking about, and they start visiting all the national parks, not because this is genuinely what brings them contentment and the actual experience of this contentment is what matters to them. Nuh-uh. Instead, they do it because of how much they imagine other people will admire it. They hang on to each other in these pictures like possums and go to great lengths to create an illusion of love. Why? Is it because they're in love? No, it's because more than anything else, they value what they imagine other people think. Remember, their entire value system is based on what they imagine other people think. And they think people love the idea of two people in love. So instead of using all that energy and time into actually achieving love in their relationship for real, they channel all the energy and all of their importance is focused on making people just believe it instead, because that really is what is most important to them. Think about it. If that's your belief system, that all value in life comes from what other people think, that is what you will do. That is how you will live. You will live in a way where most of your energy and time and concern goes into what other people think. So, Gabby's Instagram posts abruptly stopped in late August of this year. They just, boom, stop. She's so happy and loved. They're hanging all over each other, kissing each other, smooching each other, with these great backdrops in the background, all these nature pictures with them expressing just how happy they are, everything, and then the Instagram post just stopped in late August. Do you see where this is going? The two lovebirds who are just so in quote-unquote love and living the dream. Brian returned to his parents' home in Florida with the van that they were using to travel around, but without Gabby, his fiancée, on September 1st. Gabby's family, unable to get in touch with her, reported her missing on September 11th. Gabby's remains were then found in a camping area in a Wyoming forest on September 19th, near where the couple had last been seen. And now, Brian Laundrie is missing, and to say that his family doesn't seem to be very cooperative is kind of the understatement of all time. Some might say they are proactively really going out of their way to aid and abet a murderer and actively trying to hinder any quick resolution to this whole ordeal. I wouldn't go so far as to say that myself, but others probably have or would. Here's what NBC News had to say about this young dating couple. Before 22-year-old Gabby Petito went missing, she and her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, were in love. Yeah, they were in love, you see, and they were ready to embark on the road trip of a lifetime. Why is it so many people seem unable to look at the most obvious things in the world and identify them properly? How can anybody with a straight face go on to describe an environment of angst, stress, pain, selfishness, frustration, and sadness, as NBC News is about to do and that I'm about to share with you, and then with a straight face categorize that as love? NBC News does it here with absolutely no sense of irony or embarrassment whatsoever. Anybody with the brain of a guinea hen already knows that NBC News is a totally fraudulent and corrupt source of reliable and accurate information anyway. But the fact that they call this love after what you're about to hear just shows you the extent of their incompetence as intellectuals. Do me a favor. Sometime this week, when you get a chance, if you get a chance, I'd just ask you to take a moment to sit down, close your eyes, and imagine the sort of environment authentic love would just naturally create. What sort of natural conditions and environment would authentic love naturally create? When you think of love as a quality and how it has to behave, it has to behave, being love and everything. In other words, the purest and most good quality in the universe, right? That's what love is. It's the purest and most good quality in the universe. So close your eyes and imagine what sorts of conditions or environment you would naturally expect. What would you naturally expect to see anywhere love is truly existing? Remind yourself, it's the purest and most good quality in the universe, love. Now, if you look out at some family or any relationship, or even if you just examine your own relationship, and the conditions you observe don't fit what you imagined love would naturally give birth to, what conclusion can you draw? What conclusion can you draw? Well, that ain't love. See, that's not hard at all. It does not take a rocket scientist to draw that obvious conclusion. Strong feeling, you might be saying to yourself, all right, but I feel like I'm really in love. I feel lots of strong things. So? Are you saying that what you feel is a better gauge, a better determiner of these things than the obvious environment of chaos that is there. What you feel is not a demonstration of facts, all right? So, you might feel lots of things, but what you feel is not what determines love. You're probably imagining strong feelings of attraction, right? I've felt that lots of times in my life. Very intense, powerful feelings of attraction. Strong feelings of attraction is not love. Strong feelings of attraction can be based on all sorts of unhealthy, selfish, self-centered things. Right? Think about it. Just because I want a thing and I'm attracted to it and I desire it, that is not love. So how people feel is not what determines love. Love is determined by attitudes, behaviors, and the peaceful, patient, kind, and serene sorts of environment and conditions that it naturally gives birth to. Identifying love for real as simple as the exercise I just gave you. If it doesn't look like love, remembering what Jordan would always say, if it looks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, then it's a duck. If it doesn't look like a duck, it doesn't quack like a duck, it doesn't behave like a duck, it ain't a freaking duck. So if it don't look like love, if it don't behave like love, and it doesn't naturally give birth to serene, peaceful conditions like love, then it ain't love, period. It don't matter how attracted you feel, or how much you think you need another person, or how much you can't imagine life without him or her. All of those things are selfish and self-centered. Can't you see that? Those are based on selfish and self-centered things. What it does for me, what I want, what I crave, what I desire. And love is not that. Get a pen and jot this down. Or, open the Notes app on your phone. Love, by its inherent nature, and do you appreciate what I'm saying when I say by its inherent nature? I'm saying there's no other alternative. So it's like ice is cold, right? And if you find hot ice, that ain't ice. So love, by its inherent nature, naturally gives birth to these things. It creates an environment that is a refuge from stress, fear, worry, pain, jealousy, selfishness, angst, frustration, sadness, mistreatment, and other negative, unhappy things. Remember, we're talking about a quality that is the apex of goodness and what is fine in the world. There's no other quality that outweighs it as far as goodness goes, right? So I'm going to say it again if you got your pen. Love, by its inherent nature, creates an environment that is a refuge from stress, fear, worry, pain, jealousy, selfishness, angst, frustration, sadness, mistreatment, and other negative, unhappy things. The idea is that the world is full of these negative things, the pain and fear and worry and jealousy and all these things. When you're with somebody who loves you and you come to them at the end of the workday or whatever, if they love you for real, if they're experiencing that quality for you toward you, then when you come to them, they should be a refuge from these things. So, if your relationship choice doesn't feel like a refuge from these things, but instead it contributes regularly to stress, fear, worry, pain, jealousy, selfishness, angst, frustration, sadness, mistreatment, and other negative, unhappy things in your life, well, you can now stop lying to yourself and others or being purposefully ignorant by talking about this relationship you're in and thinking about it as love. That's not love. Calling it love is blasphemy. You're blaspheming about one of the purest and greatest qualities that exists and making a mockery out of it. Don't do that. Don't be a dummy. A purposeful dummy. You know, it's the worst kind of dummy, is the purposeful dummy. So now with all these things in context, and with a greater appreciation for what love really is and what it really ain't, let's continue the Gabby and Brian story. The couple began a cross-country tour of national parks in July, documenting their journey on YouTube and Instagram using the hashtag #VanLife. Gabby and Brian met in high school, Gabby's mother said, and announced their engagement last year. Brian asked me to marry him, and I said yes, Gabby wrote on Instagram again, creating a totally horseshit narrative. You make life feel unreal, and every day is such a dream with you, she says. Remember, let's put that into context. What was her most important thing in life? Was it actually being happy? Really being in love? And things like that? No. What was most important to her, and I hate to speak poorly of the dead, but this is just the darn truth. What was most important to her was what other people thought. So that's the context while she's posting this on Instagram and on Facebook. The reward for her is not in whether she's really happy and any of that stuff. The reward is in selling the illusion so that lots of people will think she's happy, right? People thinking she's happy is actually more valuable to her than being happy. It's heartbreaking. So again, only concerned about people believing that she was just living the dream rather than actually experiencing those things. Gabby of Blue Point, New York, later moved to Northport, Florida to live with Brian, Gabby's mother said. This year's road trip wasn't Gabby's first. She documented a western-bound trip on Instagram in 2019. In January 2020, in a post, she said driving across the country to California and Oregon was an absolute dream. Of course, everything is just the max, right? It's just the max. It's just the best of everything. She's always just so happy, and everything's just so perfect all the time. It's just we've got the context of knowing why she's trying to sell this so hard. In May 2020, she posted that she couldn't wait to get back to traveling the world with Brian because life is just so blissful. On August 12th, police in Moab, Utah responded to a report of a domestic problem between Gabby and Brian. It happened as Gabby and Brian were driving, according to a police report. A responding officer reported that the couple's van was traveling about 45 miles per hour in a 15-mile-per-hour zone. As the officer turned on the lights to pull over the van, it swerved and hit a curb before coming to a stop, according to the report. Another officer wrote that Gabby had slapped Brian after an argument, at which point Brian allegedly attempted to lock her out of the van. She forced her way back in before Brian drove off, according to the report. Sounding like love to you, folks? Huh? Does it sound like real love to you? Or are you disregarding everything I've told you and saying, well, they felt love, right? They felt what they thought was love, and that's what matters. Well, the facts, the environment here that we're looking at is not bearing that out. It's not bearing the evidence out that was love. If it doesn't look like a duck, don't quack like a duck, don't waddle like a duck, it ain't love. It ain't love. So the two told the officer that, again, here makes me want to puke, they're in love and engaged to be married and desperately didn't want to see anyone charged with a crime, according to the report. So you got that? They just got done slapping and knocking the shit out of each other and locking each other out of the van and just about crashing the van. And this is love. Again, sit back in your chair, close your eyes, imagine what the purest, most good quality in the universe gives birth to. Now imagine this situation here and see if those two things are harmonious. They ain't. This isn't love. These people don't know what love is. The pair was told to separate for the night, with Gabby maintaining possession of the van. Body cam footage released Thursday also captured some of the encounter with police. It showed an officer talking to Brian and an emotional Gabby after authorities pulled over the van. Gabby could be seen wiping away tears. I'm sorry, Gabby said after the officer asked why she was crying. We'd just been fighting this morning, some personal issues. Just totally normal. This is just totally normal as could be. All people do this. Brian added, it was a long day. We were camping yesterday. When the officer asked Brian about scratches on his face, he responded, she had her phone and was trying to get the keys from me. More love. Look at all that love there. It's exactly the way it behaves, isn't it? You're scratching people in the face, fighting, struggling over things, almost wrecking the car. And that is love, right? The purest, most attractive quality in the universe. And this is how it manifests. I don't think so. I don't think so. And I'm being sarcastic. It's not that I just don't think so. It's that I know so. It's bewildering to me how people resist connecting the dots. So there you go. Two people making a total mockery of love with no sense of irony or self-awareness whatsoever, and a major news organization here in the United States contributing to the whole absurdity of talking about love anywhere in the context of this entire story. So that's that. Because it's been in the news, because it's relevant to what we talk about here, I want to share it. Now let's get into today's primary topic, which is not about love, believe it or not. Although in a way, I guess it is about love. Because love causes a person to always be quick to admit when they're at fault. But today's primary topic specifically is about apologies. Do you know how to apologize? Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe you think you do, but you never really gave it any thought. Maybe you're wondering why this is something we have to talk about at all. After all, how hard is it really to walk up to somebody and say, I'm sorry? Well, real apologies aren't just saying I'm sorry. And today we're going to talk about why that is. So I've been asking you to imagine a lot of things today. I'm going to do it again. Take a moment to imagine that you're walking around town. You're doing some window shopping. You've got a cup of coffee in your hand from Wawa. If you don't know what Wawa is, then you can imagine the coffee place of your choice. But you've got this Wawa coffee in your hand. It's morning. The birds are chirping. And you're just enjoying a casual day off work as you kind of casually stroll around, enjoying the day. Suddenly, a person taps you on the shoulder. And when you turn around, there's a lady standing there, and she says to you, do you accept responsibility for it? What would be your answer? Do you accept responsibility for it? What would be your answer? You don't know who she is. You have no idea what she's talking about. She just comes up to you out of the blue, taps you on the shoulder, and the only thing she says is, do you accept responsibility for it? What are the odds standing there with your cup of Wawa coffee in your hand, having never seen this woman before in your life, or having never talked to her, having no idea what she's talking about? What are the odds that you would say to her, yes, I do accept responsibility for it? I'd say the odds of this being your reply are about less than 0. Much more likely, your reply would be something along these lines. Excuse me? Or, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Or maybe, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about. Do I accept responsibility for what exactly? Right? Wouldn't you agree that this would be the much more likely way for this conversation to play out? After all, how can a person be expected to accept responsibility for anything without first knowing what that thing is? How can you accept responsibility for a thing you don't even know what it is? Well, apologizing is a lot like this. It's always interesting to me when people think they can apologize for a thing that they don't even know what they're apologizing for. So, they think they can apologize for a thing that they can't even see, and that they've made no effort whatsoever to see. What is an apology supposed to be a reflection of? Well, it's supposed to be a reflection of remorse, right? So how can you feel remorse for something you don't even understand enough to feel remorse for in the first place? How can you feel remorse for a thing that you can't even see? You don't even know it exists. So now, sitting here having this conversation with you, I'm imagining myself, or remembering myself rather, in my past life as a person with borderline personality disorder, married to my ex-wife Diana, and I'm remembering me apologizing to her for things I didn't even understand. For example, she's upset, and I know she's upset, but I don't really know the subtleties of it. But I go upstairs anyway. After enough time has passed, I sit on the edge of the bed, I stroke her arm with my hand, and I say, "Hey, I know you're upset. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry." What am I apologizing for specifically? I don't even know. I don't even know what I'm apologizing for. So am I really sorry? How can I be sorry for something I don't even know, fully understand that I'm supposed to be sorry for? How can I possibly be sorry for something I don't even see or understand? The answer is that I can't be. That's the answer. I can't be sorry for something I can't even see. Can't be sorry for something that I have yet to see. So how much value does the apology have? It has no value at all. In fact, my apology is not an apology at all. Kind of like love is not just a feeling. It's not just, I feel attraction, I feel affection. That's not love. Well, an apology is not just, I'm sorry. Me saying, I'm sorry, me offering an apology for something I don't even know fully understand what I'm apologizing for, is no different than if I sat on the edge of the bed and said to her, hey, I see you're upset, so how about just not being upset now? Do you see that this is really the only thing I'm after? Me saying I'm sorry is not really expressing remorse. It's just a way of me saying, don't be mad at me anymore. Because the only thing I'm really after is to convince her not to be upset at me anymore. But am I sorry for whatever's making her upset? No. Again, how can I be sorry for something that I'm not even aware of, that I can't even see? All I know is that she's upset at me, and if I can say something so that she won't be upset at me anymore, then this is really my driving interest. Do you remember the letter I got from my dad that I talked about a lot just a couple of episodes back in episode 5? Do you remember what he was doing? He was apologizing and also guessing about what was bothering me. Think about that for a second. He was apologizing. At the same time he's apologizing, he's guessing about what's bothering me. So how much value did that apology have? He doesn't even know what he's apologizing for. He doesn't even know what he supposedly feels remorse for. So how much value does the apology have? It doesn't have any value. It's not even really an apology. So it's absurd because, for one, well, there's a lot of reasons it's absurd. The biggest reason it's absurd is because he doesn't have to guess about what is bothering me. I've already expressed it to him several times in no uncertain terms. But he spends no time thinking about that. Or if he does, because it's not personally important to him, right? Because what I'm upset or the injustice that I perceive is not important to him. He says, well, I don't even need to reflect on that. I don't need to spend any more time thinking about that. So I'll apologize. I'll try to guess. Well, it's like this. Because it's not important to him, there's no value on it whatsoever. So even though I've told him exactly what is upsetting me, exactly the injustice that I'm perceiving, because it holds no value to him personally, zero value, he brushes it off and says, I'm going to apologize for something else because this can't really be the thing that's bothering him. It's exactly the thing that's really bothering me. That's what he needs to show remorse for. But do you see the incredibleness of that? From his perspective, he evaluates this thing, and because he spent no time meditating on it, evaluating it, truly trying to understand it, he says, well, that's not really anything to be upset about, so that can't really be the thing that's bothering him. So when he apologizes to me, totally disregarding the thing that I view as the true injustice, how much value does his apology have? It has zero value, because whatever he thinks he's apologizing for is not the thing that I'm viewing as the injustice. So he's apologizing for a thing that is not even bothering me. Meanwhile, the thing that really is bothering me, he places no value on. It's of such little importance to him that he literally sweeps it away as being something of just not even worth the time to sit and consider. So how much value does an apology from him have? Zero value. So he doesn't have to guess about what is bothering me. But he's put himself in this situation of guessing because he disregards what I specifically, in detailed terms, expressed to him as being totally unimportant. So secondly, the things I told you he expressed regret about are things that are completely irrelevant to me. So, one of the things was spending more time with me when I was a kid. Yeah, sure. That's the thing that I'm all tore up about. That the man who was the most abusive figure in my life didn't set aside more time to focus on me and have more time to be abusive toward me. That's what he thinks I'm upset about. Give me a freaking break. Of course I'm not upset about that. I'm relieved about that. So if that's what he's apologizing about, something that it's all in his head, it's really not even a thing that even the idea of it is disgusting to me. So he's apologizing for something that he didn't do that is the whole idea of it is disgusting to me. And so he's apologizing for that. How much value does that apology have? Zero value. So when he ended the letter with "I'm sorry," what value did his apology have? It didn't have any value whatsoever. Because you can't apologize for what you can't see in the first place. How can you apologize for a thing you're completely blind to? What are you apologizing for specifically if you don't know what good is the apology? What is "I'm sorry" specifically meant to express? It's specifically meant to express remorse. So when you say "I'm sorry," what you're literally saying to somebody is, I am remorseful for ... All right? What are you remorseful for? I'm remorseful that I didn't spend more time with you as a kid. Okay? But you're not spending more time with me as a kid is not what is upsetting to me. That's not the injustice that I'm upset about. And that has never been upsetting to me. So then maybe you'll get the generic apology next. Do you know what the generic apology is? The generic apology is this. Well, then I'm just sorry for whatever has you upset. Have you ever said that yourself? Or have you ever received a fake apology like that yourself? Well, I'm just sorry for whatever has you upset. So, does the generic apology carry any weight or have any value? We've already established it does not. How can you be sorry, that is remorseful, for something you don't even know about? You can't be. You don't even know what that thing is. So how can you be remorseful about it? The apology is worthless. So the appropriate question to ask somebody who gives you the generic apology, I'm sorry for whatever has you upset. It's just like this blanket thing, I'm sorry for... It's like a presidential pardon for anything that you might have done. So the correct response to somebody who tries to pull a generic apology on you is this. Oh, really? And so what is it that has me upset? That's what you ask them. When they say, I'm sorry for whatever I did that upset you. Okay, what did you do that upset me? You see, if they don't know what they did to upset you, or what has you upset, how can they be remorseful for their part in it? And if they can't see what their part in it is or was, and they've also not demonstrated any interest whatsoever in putting forth any effort whatsoever to understand it, are they really remorseful? Think about what remorse moves you to do. And now let me ask that question again. They've demonstrated no interest in understanding their part in it, what the injustice was. And they've put in no effort whatsoever to understand that injustice, or why they committed that injustice, or how they could have committed that injustice. Are they really remorseful? Of course they're not remorseful. Remember, I'm sorry is literally saying, I'm remorseful for ... They don't even know what they're supposedly remorseful for, and they're not even motivated to go out of their way to understand what that thing is. So again, you're out on your Sunday stroll with your coffee and somebody runs up to you. Do you love it? They ask. And you turn around and you say, yeah, I do love it. Okay, the person replies, what is it that you love? I have no idea, you answer. Oh, all right, they say. So your claims of loving it then are absolutely worthless, is what you're telling me. Oh, I guess so. See, these are examples you probably think border on the absurd. But is it really any less absurd when you apologize to somebody for something you don't even fully understand, and you've made no genuine effort to understand it? Or is it any less absurd when somebody apologizes to you in this way, or I should say attempts to apologize to you in this way, because, as I said, that's not an apology at all. So it's not any less absurd. We can't feel remorse for something we don't even see or understand. And feeling remorse that somebody is upset with us, that's not a real thing. If you think that you can feel remorse for somebody being upset with you, you don't know what remorse means. You're misusing the word remorse. That's not the meaning of remorse. You can't feel remorse for what somebody else feels. Remorse is based on something you have done or not done. And somebody else feeling a thing is not an example of you doing or not doing a thing. You can regret that they feel the way they do, but you can't feel remorse that they feel that way. You can feel remorse for something you did that they are now using to feel the way they feel. But you can't feel remorse about something somebody's feeling. You can only feel remorse for something you had control over, right? That you did wrong or that you failed to do. And people's feelings, that's something they're doing themselves. So you can't feel remorse over something that other people are doing themselves. So the only situations that remorse can even exist in is for things that we recognize that we personally did wrong. So again, what others feel is not an example of something we're doing wrong. Them feeling is not an example of us doing. You know, we have got no control over what other people feel. We have control over what our behaviors toward other people. You know, things we do to them, things we say to them, things like that. We can feel remorse over that. But you know, they can feel and will feel however they're going to feel about those things. The only thing we have any control over is what is our actions. So you can only feel remorse for something you recognize as you haven't done that you should have done differently or not at all. So what is a healthy apology process, and why is it called a process? Well, you should be starting to understand why it is called a process by now, because this is very important. The real value in an apology is the fact that you care enough to examine honestly the situation and honestly try to understand the nuances of what it is that you did wrong. Did you pick up on that? The real value is the demonstration that you truly care. So do you see that this is where the value in a real apology exists? Not in the words "I'm sorry," but in the way genuinely caring motivates you. How it motivates you to investigate and honestly examine the situation. There's only one reason people don't truly try to understand what they're apologizing for, and the answer is as obvious as the nose on your face. What's the one reason people don't truly try to understand what they're apologizing for? They don't care. That's the answer. They don't care. Because if they did care, what would you naturally see? See, that answers the question. So they may not like being inconvenienced, and they may not like you being angry at them, and they may not like being held accountable, and they may not like the feeling of being judged. But none of these things are being born of real care or love toward you. The reason a real apology is so valuable is that when it happens, it's obvious that the person first cared enough to really meditate on the solution. The reason a real apology is so valuable is that when it happens, it's obvious that the person first cared enough to really meditate on the situation until they could understand the nuances of the offense and what it is they did wrong. So by the time the apology reaches you, or you express it to another, it's clear that the apology has real value. It's not just empty words. It reflects true concern and care for others. That is a real apology. So here's the healthy apology process. And bear in mind that this is for real injustices and serious offenses. This is not something for just, accidentally stepping on somebody's foot in line at the Piggly Wiggly or accidentally calling somebody by the wrong name. Still, even though this apology process is primarily appropriate for real injustices and serious offenses, this is not to say that it doesn't provide us with a healthy model for all aspects of life and dealings with people. So grab a pen and paper or get out the Notes app on your phone or tablet, and we'll go through these. There are 12 steps to the apology process. And we understand now, right, why it's called a process. Number 1, acknowledging what you did to hurt, offend him or her. Now, this is harder than what you'd think. Like my dad with that letter. He's like shooting a gun in the dark. Boom, boom, boom. Hoping that he will hit something that is right. He's hoping that he will hit on something that is truly part of his real injustices and offenses. So instead of sitting down and really spending time to truly understand what he did to hurt / offend me, the injustice, instead he's just going to shoot his gun in the dark. Boom, 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 hope it hits something. And so going on now 10 years, this has not worked out for him. it would not be too hard for him to figure out if he would just meet my condition for having contact with me. You know, if he'd go to somebody who understands these things better and would talk to them, they could probably help him figure it out pretty quick. But he won't do that. So number one in the apology process is acknowledging what you did. So maybe number 1B, you can write, imagine how what I did must have affected the other person. And it might even go something like this. You might say, this is how I imagine you must feel because of what I did. Think about how the fact that if you can't even acknowledge what it is you did to hurt or offend the other person, how can you apologize for that? You can't. Number one, acknowledging what you did to hurt or offend the other person is prime time, man. It's without it, your apology is worthless. You have to acknowledge it. And if you try to acknowledge it, and the other person says, well, that's not what's bothering me, it's time to go back to the drawing board and sit down and think about it some more. Number 2, learn how what you did impacted him or her. So, how do you learn how what you did impacted the other person? The way you do that is you give that person a chance to tell you for themselves how they feel. And you listen. You don't defend yourself, you listen. Number 3, express an understanding of that impact. So you've sat with them, you've given them a chance to tell you for themselves how they feel. So now you're going to express an understanding of that impact. And the way you do this is that you clarify, this is how I imagined it impacted you. And now I understand that this is actually how it really impacted you. So you clarify between what you imagined and what that impact really was for them. Number 4, make restitution where needed and possible. Number 4, make restitution where needed and possible. Maybe they don't want restitution. So I would say, first of all, you have to evaluate whether they're even open to that, right? But restitution is replacing, restoring, compensating, etc. But again, let's say that you robbed your next door neighbor. You get here down to number 4, make restitution. Well, the neighbor doesn't have to forgive you, right? Your apology does not guarantee forgiveness. Just remember that. So don't go into an apology feeling entitled to forgiveness. They don't owe you anything. And your reason for giving an apology is not out of a sense of entitlement that if you give an apology, you are absolutely guaranteed of forgiveness. So let's say that you've robbed your next door neighbor of his goat, right? He had a prize goat. You went over there, you stole that goat, and you're enjoying the best goat's milk in all of your neighborhood. Neighbor finds out, you go through the apology process, you get to make restitution, but he doesn't want anything to do with you. You try to bring over a brand new goat because the other goat died. The other goat got COVID-19, dropped over dead. So you trying to bring over another goat, you think it's even better than the first goat. But the neighbor doesn't want anything to do with you. So what do you got to do? You got to respect the neighbor. That's why number 4 says make restitution where needed and possible. Part of that possible is the person even open to that? If they're not, restitution involves leaving them alone. Number 5, learn how you did what you did. Probably my favorite one. Because if a person is motivated to learn how they did what they did, to me that demonstrates real remorse. So number 5, learn how you did what you did. You want to examine the thoughts, the perspectives that you live with that allowed you to do that at all. The decisions, behaviors before, during, and after your offense. Number 6, learn why you did what you did. So you've gone to effort, you've put in effort to learn how you did what you did, thoughts, decisions, behaviors. Now you want to understand why you did what you did. Your underlying motivations. Was it fear? Was it revenge? Was it numbing out? Was it addictions? Was it coping mechanisms? Number 7, explain to the person that you have committed the injustice against. Explain to him or her how and why you did what you did. So first you have spent the time learning how you did what you did, and you've spent the time honestly examining why you did what you did. Now you're going to explain it to the other person. Here's how. Here's why. Honestly. Number 8, identify what you need to do to never repeat that again. That offense. Number 9, now that you've identified what you need to do to never repeat that behavior, number 9 is share your plan of action with the other person. So number 8 was you sat down by yourself. You worked out the details of exactly how to avoid ever doing that again. And number 9 is you're sitting down with the other person. You're saying, I figured out, I think, a way that I can avoid ever treating you that way again. And this is the way I'm going to ensure it. Number 10, overtly apologize again. Express sorrow, express remorse, and express a commitment not to repeat the hurtful behaviors. Number 11, now is the time to ask for forgiveness and a chance to restore trust. 11's kind of important. Remember, I said nobody's obligated to forgive you, but you're asking for them to, and you're asking for a chance to restore trust. What if they say no? There's no chance to restore trust here. I'm done. You respect that, you move on. What if they say, I don't grant you forgiveness right now. I need more time. I may never be in the right place to grant you forgiveness. What do? Well, if your apology means anything, you respect them and you say, okay, I understand that, because I truly do understand the gravity of my offense. But after you've done all these things, you're down here to number 11, it is appropriate for you to at least ask for forgiveness. You've earned the right to ask for it, and you've earned the right to ask for a chance to restore trust. The answer might be no, but you can ask for it, and in most cases, I think, especially if you've done number 1 through 10, most reasonable people will be impressed and willing to grant you that. And finally, number 12. It's very simple. Follow through. Number 12 is follow through. And that's it. That's the apology process. As you can see, it's a lot more involved than just saying I'm sorry. And again, this is not for accidentally bumping somebody in line at the movie theater. We're talking about real offenses, real injustices here that you commit against other people. All right, I promised you a campfire story. The kid's name was José, and I had invited some folks over to my apartment in the city, and José, I had a patio out back. This is a big apartment complex, but it was all like one-story apartment complex, and it had this really nice spread with like a pond and fields out back and everything, and a real nice patio out back with sliding glass doors. And I invited all those people over to my apartment, and one person there had a little son named José, and José was about 5 years old. And he come out back there, and I was telling him stories and whatnot. He kind of looked up to me. As I say, he was about 5 years old, I think, at this time. And so it was just him and me. I had the sliding doors open, and I was sitting out back sipping on some booze. And old José, he come out there, kicked up his feet, and we were talking, man to man. And along the duration of this conversation, I found out that José was quite fond of Batman. In fact, Batman was somebody he was really, really impressed with. And I said, well, José, it's kind of ironic that you're just such a big fan of Batman. And he said, why's that? I said, well, your mom didn't tell you? He says, tell me what? I said, well, my neighbor right next door here, she is Batman's sister. I just found out the other day. I was talking to her, and it just turns out that she's Batman's sister. He says, get out of here. And I said, no, I'm serious. Yeah, I was talking to her. I'm as surprised about it as you are. Just talking to her there, and she's very unassuming and everything. But the longer I got to talk to her, we got to talk about superheroes and everything. And she's like, "Well, who's your favorite superhero?" And I said, "Superman." And she said, "Superman?" And I said, "Yeah, I like Superman." And she said, "Well, that wasn't really the answer I was hoping to hear." And I said, "Oh, well, what were you hoping to hear?" And she said, "Well, Batman." And I said, "Well, I like Batman, but he's, he can't fly or anything, can't shoot lasers out of his eyeballs or anything like that." And she said, "Well, I got to admit, I'm a little biased." And I said, what do you mean by that?" And she said, "Well, Batman's my brother." And I said, You're kidding me. Are you for real?" And she said, "Yeah, he's my brother." I said, "What? Prove it." And so she took me into her apartment, and she showed me all this Batman stuff she had. And I said, "Well, then you let me talk to him." So she got on the phone, and she dialed up Batman, and I got to talk to Batman for a few minutes. José was sitting there with eyes, I'm telling you, they were like, they were as big as dinner plates. And his little 5-year-old José, and his mouth was hanging open. And I wish I had a picture of him. And it was all I could do to tell this story. without giving myself away, and laughing. And he was sitting there with his eyes all wide open, mouth hanging open, and he said, "No way, you talked to Batman?" And I said, "Yeah, sure enough." She got him on the line, and Batman and I talked for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then he was like, "Excuse me, I gotta go fight crime down here. The Joker is causing chaos down here." And then it was just gone. And José couldn't believe it. And I said, "José, I'll tell you what, buddy, if you go next door here. So remember, we're sitting in the back patio from the glass sliding door, and my neighbor's glass sliding door, I didn't even know her. I'd said like 3 words to her my entire life. So I said, Jose, if you go over there and if you knock on her glass sliding door, just go over there, knock on her door, and when she answers the door, you tell her that you're visiting me and that you really love Batman, and ask if you ask if you can call Batman on her phone. The reason why it's so funny to me is because I was really giving it all I had, man. I wanted to see him. I really wanted to see him go next door and knock on her door. I wanted to see that whole I wanted to see how that whole interchange take place. Hi, I want to talk to Batman on your phone. And I wanted to watch her confusion while she tried to figure out what was going on. So he goes over there and he does it. He knocks on her door, and he knocks and knocks. He comes back over and he says, nobody's answering over there. I said, go over there and give it another try, Jose. He went over there, knock, knock, knock. Nobody answered. And then his mom poked her head out the window at the doors. She said, Jose, we got to go. Man, he didn't want to go. No, we can't go, Mom. We can't go. I got to talk to the neighbor. And his mom's like, what? You got to talk to the neighbor? And I just kind of winked at her, and I was like, yes, kind of let her know, that there was an ongoing joke there. Oh, come on, Jose. So she left, and and for like a year and a half after that, his mom hated my guts because that was all he talked about, was getting back over to my apartment so that he could go next door and talk to Batman on my neighbor's phone, who was a complete stranger. Oh, goodness gracious. I'll tell you where I got the idea for that. And I told that, you guys remember in, I think, season 2 of this show, I was doing these encouraging finales at the end of each show. And I told the story about when I went to stay with my aunt, Rachel, one summer in Indiana. And I went there, and I was in my early 20s, I think. I might have been 19. I might have even not been 20 yet. But she invited me down to spend a week with her and her husband. Jim was his name. I said, sure, I'll come down there. We'll have all kinds of fun stuff. And one morning I got up, come out of my room, wiping the sleep out of my eyes and kind of like bouncing off furniture like a ping pong machine, like you do when you first wake up and your brain's not totally awake. I get to the table, and Jim's sitting there eating eggs and bacon. He goes, hey, Brian, do you like baseball? Well, at the time, I wasn't a huge baseball fan. And I said, well, sure, I guess I do. And he goes, I wasn't a big sports fan at all, of any sport. Of course, now I love baseball. But at the time, it was just kind of like I could take it or leave it. And so he's sitting there eating his bacon and eggs, and he goes, do you like baseball? I said, well, yeah, I guess so. He says, do you know who Pete Rose is? I said, sure, I know who Pete Rose is. He said, look out there, out the back window there. He said, you see that house back there? I said, yeah. And my aunt was in there in the kitchen, like milling about. He goes, tell him about that house, Rachel. So my aunt just picks up right where he leaves off. I mean, they haven't pre-planned this or anything. They haven't talked about this. They've never pulled this joke. They just come up with it spontaneously, right on the spot, and they just fed off one another. She says, oh, oh yeah, that house back there. She says, if you go back there and you take a baseball, they'll have Pete Rose sign it for you. And I said, what? How will they do that? And Jim, it's sort of like tag team, back and forth. Jim goes, well, they're family. They're relation to Pete Rose. I said, get out of here. Are you for real? Yeah. If anybody, you just take a baseball back here to him. You say, hey, I've heard that you're related to Pete Rose. I'd love to have this baseball signed by him. They'll get her done. And then they said nothing about it. Jim just went right back to eating his eggs and bacon, and my Aunt Rachel went back to doing her stuff. And so I sat down and started eating my breakfast, and I couldn't get that out of my head. So as the week went on, I was thinking about that. I was driving at the time. They were at work one day. I went over to Kmart or Walmart or Target or someplace. I went and I bought a baseball. Went back. They still weren't home. I walked back there, all the way back to their neighbor's house, knocked on the door, and I said, a lady answered the door. I said, hi. She said, hello. Kind of confused, like, what are you doing here? I said, hi, I'm Brian. I'm just staying back here with my Aunt Rachel and her husband Jim. And I held out my hand with that baseball, and I said, I was just kind of hoping maybe I could get a Pete Rose's autograph. She said, Pete Rose's autograph? I said, yeah. She looked down at that ball and she said, why are you asking me? I said, well, because you're related. And she said, I'm related to who? Pete Rose. She says, who told you I was related to Pete Rose? I said, well, the other day at breakfast, my aunt and uncle, they were telling me that you're related to him, and that if I brought you a baseball back here, that you could get him to autograph it for me. She said, hon, I think your aunt and uncle are pulling a joke on you. And that was when I realized I'd been had. Oh, man. And I wanted to die at the moment. But as I walked back there to my aunt and uncle's house, and I started thinking about the genius of that, I just never been able to forget that. That was just genius. And they come up with it completely on the spot. So there's my campfire story. I took it. I pulled it on old José. And he's now, he's almost as big as me, so there might be a day when he comes over and breaks my arm or something, but for putting him through that. But now that I've told you, you all are welcome to go and pull that practical joke on the person closest to you and just get a good old kick out of it. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this show. I'll talk to you real soon. Join us over there on Locals, will you? thelastsymptom.locals.com.